everybody. Welcome to the Keychains podcast. I'm Steve.
And I'm Ryan.
So, some exciting news for this podcast. We actually have a giveaway to deal with at the end here. So, stick around and we'll give you the details on how you can participate in that. However, we only recorded 3 days ago, so we haven't had any new play experiences since then, unless you did some Crucible or something that I was aware of.
No, it's been hectic still, so I haven't really done any playing either. Usually it's Tuesday nights for us. So I guess I don't know if we've ever gone over our recording schedule. We record on Saturday mornings or Sundays, one of those 2 days. Today happens to be Sunday, and then we release on Fridays. That gives Steve ample time to edit around full-time job and wife and social life. So because he went to a convention last weekend, we didn't record until Wednesday, and so he had to race to get it up. So we would have played on Tuesday, and then that got snowed out. So we have not actually really had our weekly play experience available to us, and none of us really found time to play outside of that.
That is, yeah, that's fair.
And this concludes the episode of A Week in the Life of Ryan and Steve.
I did get new decks.
You did. Happy birthday, Steve, by the way. For those that don't know, by the time you'll listen to this, Steve will be it's a week past Steve's birthday, so feel free to wish him a belated happy birthday.
Great.
And his social security number is no.
So, the most interesting thing about the plentiful Keyforge decks that I received, which I received a total of 7. So thank you to everybody who bought me Keyforge decks. I got 4 Logos decks for once.
Finally, right?
One of them actually ends up having a time traveler in it, which is super cool, but none of the other shenanigans that you can pull with a time traveler. I got one that has library access, but none of the shenanigans that you can really pull with library access. Although it does have a lab work and 2 phase shifts.
There you go.
So that's pretty cool. The other one has a Mobius scroll in it. Then the last one has a library access, phase shift, wild wormhole, and then a neutron shark and a psychic bug. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, so I'm pretty excited to give these a shot in the near future. But now I just have this stack of decks on my desk here that I need to sleeve and whatnot.
Psychic bug is the one where you can look at your opponent's hand, right?
I believe so. Yep, that is the play reap, look at your opponent's hand. And it gives you an ember for its existence.
Ooh, nice. So what you need is a psychic bug, phase shift, and then control the weak so you can shut down exactly what you want out of their hand, or restring it to shut down.
Yeah, so speaking of that, hang on. I did get a Shadows Sanctum Dis deck that has Restringatus in it. It also has Troubadour in it. And it has a Collar of Subordination in it.
Okay.
So Collar of Subordination is an upgrade that you play on a creature, and it is you gain control of this creature.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty sweet.
This deck has quite a few rares in it, actually. It has a safe space, which is the one where anytime you gain amber, you can use an action to put 1 amber from your amber pool onto safe space. Yep. Then it's just like a Screaming Cave is also one of the other disc cards, which I actually don't have a ton of experience with. But it is an action it's an artifact with action. Shuffle your hand and discard pile into your deck. So kind of like reverse time, but more just starting fresh as opposed to flipping the 2. So the last interesting thing through my decks is I also got another deck with Annihilation Ritual in it, but it also has a Key Hammer in it. And then the last kind of noteworthy bit in one of my decks here is I got one that has a Key Hammer, which is an action play if your opponent forged a key on their previous turn, unforge it. Your opponent gains 6. So, I mean, it's just a delaying tactic. It doesn't, unless you can steal it away, you can't really, you pretty much give them a key.
Oh, yeah, Key Hammer plus a bait and switch.
Well, you can't do that.
Yeah, well, You just give them their key back.
Yeah, I mean, you have like Pit Demon and like in different things that you can kind of control Amber with there. But yeah, you're pretty much giving them the key back at the end of your turn.
Right.
Just
But that's fine. You might be able to steal the ember, or maybe you have like too much to protect or something. You can just like shut them down. It's definitely a good card. I also, so when I went to get Steve his birthday present, which is a couple Keyforge decks, as he mentioned, I also got some presents for myself and got some Keyforge decks. I actually, I've been talking episode after episode about how clever I was for not getting the starter. Um, and apparently that was just because it wasn't available. Because when I went to the store, they had one available, and I caved and bought it. So all my talk about how I was so clever, saving money by not getting a starter and just using those other tokens, and then I got it the first chance I had.
hey, I mean, it's two
um,
decks and all those tokens. Like, it's
yep,
pretty worth it.
right. I found the tokens to be pretty useful. So I got that, and I got a couple other decks. So the store owner, and this is not unusual, but the store owner he had an unopened booster box. Well, I guess deck box, and then he had a partially open box of decks. So I asked if I could buy the unopened one, because I figured, enough of us play that I could just resell it, not to make a profit, but just resell it to us so that we had a stock or whatever. And open all the rest of them myself, or probably all of them myself. I mean, let's be realistic. And he said no, he wanted to keep it to 2 decks per customer. So I don't remember who, but we mentioned it to someone, and they were just surprised, like, oh, they didn't want to just sell you all the decks. And it's like, well, no, I mean, that makes sense. I mean, it doesn't hurt to ask, but it makes sense that they want to kind of keep it and spread it around to everyone. So, I mean, how frustrating would it be to, see their Facebook announcement they just got decks in and show up and they're all gone because 2 people came in and wiped them out.
Yeah, it's something I've seen quite a bit on Facebook. People are just posting up like, "Hey, we got decks in, but we're limiting them to 2 per person." So, I mean,
Right.
it's definitely a good sign. People are buying decks, so it's
Yeah. And given the nature of the game, I mean, it's not like it's a big deal that they limit you to 2, because they're going to be random anyway. Even if you bought the entire box, there's no guarantee you'd get anything pants-droppingly amazing, or jaw-droppingly amazing. I don't know, or Freudian slip.
I heard pants droppingly amazing, and the way it came out of your mouth, it sounded totally different. Like, I was like, "Is this
I know.
some like adjective that I haven't heard before?"
I guess maybe like if you don't have a belt on and you're holding your pants up, and then like someone shows you something amazing and you just like put your hands on your head like flabbergasted, and then your pants drop. That's what I was going for.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair.
It's those of us that don't wear belts apparently. No, so that was neat. No, sorry, that was neat. So out of the decks that I got, I got a couple neat ones. I got a deck with 2 reverse times and a library access, so that'll be fun. I got
For you.
yeah, for me. I got my first 2 Brobnar decks, not including the one in the starter, so that's cool. But I don't know. It's I think one of them had like 5 rares in it. I don't have it in front of me. I don't have my phone to look up the deck list either. Nothing too amazing, but they're promising. We'll see. We'll see how they go. Maybe next episode we'll have had. Well, we should have had a chance to play by then, so we can talk about how how ridiculous these decks might be.
Yeah, so we'll, I guess, check back in with all of that. I'm still feeling that high from Age of Ascension. Like, I just want to see the cards come out.
I know. It's funny. They announced like, oh, it's gonna be like we're announcing our second set, and I'm like, you know what? Honestly, they could just be announcing their second print run, and I would be almost as excited as hearing about a new set. These decks are so hard to come by. Oh, and I wanted to mention too that I kind of felt bad. Well, at first I was like, oh, well, I'll get Steve some Keyforge decks for his birthday. That'll be cool, and I shouldn't really have that much of a problem because these are hard to come by. So he might be the only ones he gets for his birthday. No, of course you get like 7. At the same time, I didn't really feel bad because the nice thing about these being procedurally generated is I know that at least my 2 decks are going to be unique, and no one else got you the same decks. So
That is true. Yeah, it was a nice surprise. Wasn't really expecting anything, and then we just got like a whole bunch of stuff dumped on me, and I was like, oh, hey, well, here we go. I'm gonna have quite a bit of time or quite a bit of playtime here out of all these decks. Actually, the neat thing is it finally pushed me over to a key in the app.
oh,
So
nice,
now I have a
nice.
key.
I know. I was thinking like, oh man, I hope Steve gets a really sweet deck, but not sweeter than any of my decks because I still need to beat him when we do any tournaments. So, so I hope I get a really sweet deck out of the ones I opened, and then Steve gets one just slightly less sweet.
Yeah, we have one coming up here actually in March, like first weekend of
Yep.
March
Yeah,
or
that's right.
second weekend of March. I think it's the nope second weekend of March.
We're going to a local convention that'll have it, a sealed actually,
Sealed.
so our deck quality will be irrelevant.
That's true. Yeah, but it'll be fun. So I'm excited about that.
It will. I'm sure there'll be pickup games and stuff too.
Yeah. So I guess we'll move on to the main topic here.
Yep, which is going to be the lore of Keyforge. Um, as someone that grew up with Magic, one of the things that I loved most about Magic was the lore. It was this crazy multiverse of different worlds and everything mixing together, and it was really interesting just how planeswalkers worked and everything else. So I was excited when Keyforge came out because it was also a Richard Garfield jam. So it would have that same sort of crazy lore that Magic did in terms of quality, depth, that kind of thing. So I was really excited to kind of dive into this episode and do my research and everything. And I don't think I'm disappointed here. Um, there's still a lot of open ended questions, but also we've only got one set, so
True.
I'm expecting there's going to be a lot more that comes out. But what we do have is pretty sweet. So let's start off with the Crucible first.
You mean the website that you play the game on?
Yeah, well, it's named after something from the lore.
Oh.
Yeah, I thought it sounded familiar. No. So the Crucible is the world on which Keyforge takes place. It's an artificial planet built by these beings known as the Architects. They're colloquial known because no one actually knows what they are, who they are, where they are, or anything. They just know that they exist and they created the Crucible. And for all that we know, they're still creating the Crucible. You see, the Crucible is an amalgamation of tons of different worlds. It's almost a multiverse jammed into a single planet. It's huge, it's monstrous in size. There's different gravities in different areas, there's different atmospheres, there's different terrain. And what the architects have done is they've taken materials or even chunks of other planets and used them to make the Crucible. For example, or that's how we have Mars in Keyforge, is because they took resources and the people of Mars and plopped them into the Crucible. So they, are just there. They're Mars, except they're our Mars, but they're over on the Crucible. So some of these creatures keep to their original ways, like Mars, for example. Some of them give up their cultures and join with houses, and they kind of take on new aspects, new roles. Some of them blend cultures. It kind of depends on the species that comes through, and some of them are just insane, like this.
I mean, are they insane or are they calculatingly?
Right, not exactly, and we'll get to that. On one of the spires, so the geography of the Crucible is such that there are different layers and different levels, and at least Call of the Ancients, no, wow, Call of the Archons. Well, I have in the show notes I have the abbreviation COTA, and so in my mind it popped up Dota, which
Oh,
is Defense of the Ancients. So my brain conflated the two. All right, so Call of the Archons takes place in a single layer of the Crucible. So it's almost like I mentioned, it's a multiverse jammed into a planet, and then there are layers that are even varied within that. And it doesn't seem, from what I've been reading and everything, it doesn't seem like there's a lot of travel between the layers and the levels of the Crucible. They just know that these other layers and levels exist.
interesting. Like the reason why I find that interesting is there's definitely like flavor text in the game that kind of does rope in a lot of the lore that you're reading. Like if you look
Mm-hmm.
at Full Moon, the flavor text on that is mathematically a moon orbiting the Crucible is impossible, and then it's the second line of then what is that? So yeah, I mean that
It makes
the
sense.
layers part of that totally makes sense now. So all right,
Yeah.
that's super cool.
Yeah. And so at one of the poles, there's only one mention that I've seen. At one of the poles, I don't know if it's north or south or if there's an east pole, but there's this thing called the Spire, and it's this giant tower that apparently goes through every level. And no one knows its purpose or anything. So I imagine either they'll never tell us, or it'll be in some kind of future expansion that it becomes relevant. Maybe that's where the architects live. I didn't see anything that implied that people went to the Spire and came back. So maybe it's like something super deadly or it's surrounded by deadly stuff.
Seems kind of Dark Towery to me.
Kind of, right? Maybe that's where the architects live, and So we talked a lot about the Crucible, the world itself. That brings us to the Archons, which is what we, the players, are embodying, or at least what our decks are embodying. So when you look at your deck, you see the name of it. If you aren't already aware, the name of the deck is actually the name of the Archon. Archons are powerful, godlike beings who seek to open the vaults of knowledge left behind by the creators of the Crucible, the architects. They don't really hire different houses so much as they attract followers from
Interesting.
among the different houses. Yeah. I thought it was like a mercenary type of thing. They'd show up, be like, hey, you, old Bruno, come with me, and I'll give you a bunch of money. And old Bruno's like, yeah, team. But it's more that old Bruno runs into an Archon and is like, hey, you know what? I like the cut of this guy's jib. And just kind of starts following him around. Now, that's not to say that following an Archon around isn't lucrative. In fact, Shadows, the House Shadows, one of the reasons a lot of those people join up with Archons is because of money. Um, Archons will find treasure, they'll find resources. In the vault, once you do open a vault, the Archon wants the knowledge that's in the vault, but there's other stuff too. And the various houses and stuff, the people from the houses can go in there. So it's not like there's contracts between these houses and the Archons, which is kind of cool. Although it doesn't make a lot of sense then how I can have an old Bruno and you can have an old Bruno. But hey, you know what? Nothing's perfect. So the characteristics of an Archon is that they kind of have this ageless wisdom about them. They can speak to any sentient creature. They are actually just beings of pure energy, but they can manifest a physical body when they want to. And they're obsessed with learning. And in some of the stories, they actually talk about how when they open a vault, it's kind of like adding a piece to themselves, and they add enough pieces and they become whole. They become their true, whole, complete self, and then they ascend and disappear. So no one really knows what happens after that to the Archons. Maybe that's a future expansion where you get super Archons with 4 houses. No. So yeah. So there's not really a lot knowing. It's just that Archons are driven to these vaults to kind of find the pieces of themselves that they need to ascend to their next level of existence.
Oh,
Um,
interesting.
and the vaults do contain knowledge, so it's not like they like go in.
I mean, it makes the card, the Archon card list. I guess it does. That does a neat job of tying like why they
Right.
look the
Yeah.
way they do on the backs of the cards. Like that's super cool.
Yeah. So those are kind of like their energy forms in a way. But they're not really beholden to any particular look or style or anything. Now, and Archons have personalities too. Different houses, the houses themselves have personalities, and then they become, a little more attracted to following a particular Archon based on the characteristics of that Archon, how that Archon has behaved. So, what is a Keyforge game? Well, if 2 Archons come across a vault, they both race to complete the keys that are needed to open it. And there's some little bits of the lore that seem to indicate that the vaults, you don't usually find a vault without another Archon around. And the Archons kind of wonder if that's deliberate on the part of the vault. Like maybe the better the reward of the vault, the more it sends out a signal, so to speak, to draw Archons in to fight over it. And that is what they do. It is a fight. It's not just like a friendly game of chess type of thing. They it's kind of like part sacred ritual, part sporting event, and part bare knuckle brawl. It's often violent, but it's rarely deadly for anyone involved because the Archons have such powerful, unique abilities that they can keep someone from dying even if they get, knocked out. And I guess that also represents how you can shuffle your deck back together and still get the same creatures, because maybe your Archon's getting them back up off the ground and setting them in for another round.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So the what happens is all the creatures are running around trying to get Ember and bring it back to the Archons, that Archon can forge a key to open the vault. The Ember is a mineral, or something like a mineral. It's a substance that interacts on a psychic level, and that'll be important later for House Dis. it's not like diamonds or anything. It's this weird psychoactive substance that's solidified and hard. Um, and then keys are not necessarily how they appear in the game. It's not like a disc that they jam Ember into and they're like, boom, score. Or it's not like a physical object necessarily. They can just they just manipulate the Ember and satisfy the needs of that particular vault, and a key is quote unquote forged. Um,
Interesting.
so it's more of a nebulous concept of forging a key than it is anything else. And they mentioned that like one of the people is like, "Oh, so do you need me to take that over to my anvil and forge it into a key for you?" And the Archon's like, "Nope, I got this." They just kind of pretty
And
much
boop.
snap their fingers and it's good.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so it's kind of neat. So I guess, I mean, obviously for the purposes of a game, we need a physical construct to denote when we forged a key, but in the lore aspect, it's not really so hard and fast.
It's also probably makes sense as to why like the tokens don't look like physical like what are, you know, what we would think of as a key, and they're just more like this weird relic.
Right. Yeah, unless you're trying to like use the edge of the key as a like a quarter to unscrew something, it's not going to get you into a door.
Well, I think what I thought of when you're kind of looking at the tokens themselves, and before we kind of went into this lore stuff, is I always looked at it like, I guess, like there's a lot of, I kind of always looked at it like you're placing the keys inside in set into the vault itself.
Right, like there's almost like three little things on the door and you're jamming the Ember into each one to unlock them. When you get all three open, then the door opens, that
Or
kind of
you're
thing.
just putting that whole like physical
Oh, I
key
see, I
into
see.
like a slot, and it just like lays flush. That's how I perceived it.
No, I gotcha, I gotcha.
So that's interesting. That definitely that changes my mental picture quite a bit.
And you know what? Now that I'm thinking about it, because I had the same mental image, like, oh, okay, so you take your object and you put it in the door in the almost Indiana Jones style, and the vault opens, and yeah, you win. But that doesn't make sense if there's two Archons, each with three keys, you know?
Yeah,
Because then
trying
it would
to
be
yeah.
whoever forges the third one opens the vault, as opposed to whoever forges three of their own. So I guess now that I'm looking back on that, we were both dumb, but
I don't think it's
no,
dumb.
I
It's
know.
just more.
There's just two doors. Each person has their own door. They're like, okay, who's gonna get their door open first?
So when it comes to the houses, then
So the different houses have very distinct styles. I mean, most of us are already going to be aware of that from playing the game. And honestly, most of us will already have a pretty solid idea of the personality of these different houses. They've done a great job of really embodying the play style and giving you a good feel of like what this house is all about based on the cards. Like even without flavor text, you can just see from the art and from the effect of the card what its purpose is, what it cares about. But we'll still run through it because there's some extra notes, beyond that. So we'll start off. These were I just lifted this information, by the way, mostly from the rulebook itself, along with a little bit of external sources. So these are all alphabetical. So we'll start with Brobnar. For Brobnar, strength matters most. All they care about is strength, and whoever's strongest is most important. They looks like they're a series of clans. Um, they when they came to the Crucible, there's rumors that they had like Nordic ties, but it's not
Hmm.
necessarily true. And they mention like a journey from Valhalla. So there's definitely some Nordic ties there, but it's not clarified that they are specifically from Earth, because that would be where the Nordic ties come from. However, they are mostly giants, so that could, quote unquote, explain where giants, like Vikings may have actually been fighting giants on our world, and then all the giants disappeared because they got sucked out to the Crucible and formed the Robnar.
Hmm.
Most of them are, like I said, giants. They're about 3 meters or 9 feet tall, give or take. Um, at some point, goblins started hanging out with them. And the Brobnar are like, that's cool, but like they treat them more like servants because they're not so physically strong. Even if the goblins are very clever, they kind of work around the fact that they're servants. Um, Brobnar love big, loud things. They like explosions. They prefer like hand to hand combat, but they're also okay with giant cannons and explosive rockets. So range combat is cool for them too. They're very similar to 40k Warhammer 40k orcs, if you're familiar with that IP, with that game. Except they're not stupid like orcs are. But they're very much that like, yeah, it needs to go faster, it needs to be bigger, it needs to be louder, which is pretty funny. And then they prefer archons that are also that show physical strength. Most of the time, if an
All
archon
right.
wants to attract a Brobnar person to their clan, they're going to have to take a physical body and show some kind of feat of strength for the Brobnar to be impressed enough to follow them around.
So it's interesting. I guess with like the base rulebook lore that they have, and now that they're bringing up these new Brobnar giants who are like more maybe not pacifists, but you know we talked about a couple of them during the last episode,
Mhm.
but I'm interested to see how they tie those into the kind of base lore that they have written
Well,
for Brobnar right now.
Well, remember the thing that matters most to Brobnar is strength. It doesn't mean that you have to go around slamming everyone's head into walls. So even though there's like the pacifist one that's laying in a pasture sniffing a flower, he's still got what, like 11 power or something.
It's like 6 power.
Six. Oh, that's right. I'm thinking of the other one, the Titan one.
Yeah, the
Um,
the Titan.
so I mean, 6 strength is still strong. He just doesn't need to show it all the time. So I think that still
That's fair.
jives with what Brobnar's trying to do. It's just conditional strength.
I think the 40k orcs thing was like putting that thought process in my head.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, no, they're not necessarily aggressive like the 40k orcs either. It's just that they love the same sort of things. Like honestly, they would probably be BFFs.
They seem a lot like I mean I guess it works in that sense of them being like Nordic in nature is like they seem a lot like Salvatorian barbarians
Yeah.
from like Forgotten Realms or something like that.
Yep. That's a very good parallel as well. So we'll move on to Dis. The Dis creatures, according to the myths and stories of everyone on the Crucible, are these half demon nightmares that live between worlds. And they eat people for sustenance. Um,
So are they like half demon, half nightmare?
I think it's more that they're half demon, half something, and that is a
Oh,
nightmare in and of itself.
oh, okay.
Um, so Logos kind of shuts that down hard. They're like, no, science, come on, guys. And so they think that the Dis are like half mechanical ish construct things, and that when they live in between worlds, they actually live between the current layer that Keyforge takes place in and another layer. And in that in
Oh,
between space, they're kind of like sensory deprived, and so they come out from there and consume ember and take people because they want like the extreme emotions, and they can kind of consume that psychic energy for sustenance. And then people reply to that by saying, "Yeah, that still sounds like half demon nightmares that live in between worlds." So I'm pretty sure we're saying the same thing.
fair.
Yeah. In reality, like what we know as players, the Dis are living beings. They consume ember. They are slightly crazy, but not like completely insane or anything. Um, they're kind of psychically oriented, and consuming ember um, is how they kind of just sustain themselves. They also like out like the extreme emotions, and since ember is a psychoactive substance, they get that kind of experience from consuming the ember. There's demons and imps in disc culture, and the demons are like top rank, and then imps are kind of the lower rung. Um,
Gotcha.
and they're very part sorcery, part technology. When I say sorcery, there isn't really a concept of actual magic in the game. It's more psychic ish pseudoscience powers that are granted by consuming ember or being around ember. So they don't actually have magic abilities. No one does, in fact. And that's kind of dis. So they're still half demon nightmares. They're just not literally from hell. So logos are very egotistical. They're probably, I think, more than any other house in the game, they are the most obvious in terms of what they are, what they do, what they care about. Just from looking at the cards, they're very egotistical. They care about science and learning and inventions and technology. Um, they have kind of split themselves into two broad groups: the theorists and the mechanists. The theorists care, obviously, as the name implies, about theories and rationale and coming up with explanations for things. And the mechanists are more on the building side of things. They build the inventions, they get their hands dirty, so to speak. Uh, and each of those groups think that the other group is inferior. So,
Hmm.
there's a lot of tension, I guess, at dinner parties.
Yeah, that's interesting that there's like not infighting, but I guess it
in
is kind of
in squabbling.
yeah.
Yeah. Um, so if you're familiar with Magic, they're blue, like they're quintessential blue. Um, and maybe I should go through and mention too what these guys want from Archons. What it wants from an Archon is it wants that sensory experience. It wants an Archon to be able to kind of bring them out, get them amber, get them fed, so to speak. Um, the logos, what they want is just learning experiences. The logos are very, very curious about archons and learning more about archons. They're just naturally drawn to an archon from a study perspective. But the archons can also kind of promise them knowledge and new experiences that they appreciate as well. Mars has not changed since they've arrived at the Crucible. They were on their last legs back on Mars. They had used a type of mineral or substance called cavorite that fueled all of their vehicles and technology, but it polluted Mars, and they were just about to pretty much go away when they were lifted and dumped onto the Crucible. Now they use Ember in all of their devices and technology instead. And they are very, very much the same. They coming so close to the end of their species, they've become very xenophobic, and they very much adopted the idea that Mars must live on at all costs, and they don't want really anything to do with anyone else. They want all the technology. They want all of the things. Mars comes first for them. They have built flying saucers, but for some reason they can't get into orbit. Maybe it's because they're trapped between layers. I don't know. But they're a little irritated about that. As far as Mars goes, they have two groups. They have elders and soldiers. Elders are the ones that have kind of the long necks. You see, if you kind of look at the different art on the Mars cards, you'll see kind of two different visually distinct types of creatures. The soldiers are the little guys that usually use the guns and blast stuff. Soldiers are heavily used, or cloning is heavily used with the soldiers, and they are not supposed to have a personality or individualistic thought, whereas elders are more concerned with that. Mars is actually not a big fan of the Archons, but they understand that sometimes, mostly it's because they fear that exposing soldiers to the Archons might give them new experiences and new thoughts that they don't want them to have. But they also understand that the Archons can get them more power and materials and stuff like that, so it's kind of a necessary evil.
You can see a lot of that in the cards. Honestly, the way you kind of describe this structure, it seems very like Invader Zim, the like
Yeah.
Almighty Tallest kind of thing.
Yeah, actually, that's a really good way of putting it. Man, I haven't seen that show forever. I need to go back to it at some point, rewatch it. So that brings us to Sanctum. In this layer of the Crucible, there are a bunch of floating islands. Some people say that it's a construction project that hasn't been started yet by the architects, or it's part of the next one. Some people say it's left over from the last construction project, but one way or the other, people live on these islands. The islands are collectively governed and referred to as the Sanctum. The Sanctum is mostly run by the Church of the Opened Eye, which is their logo.
Oh.
Yeah. I didn't see a
So
whole
your
lot.
joke about Sanctum was certainly not too far off from reality.
No, well, mine was that they were the Church of it was the Order of the Exclamation Point.
Oh, that's right.
That's right.
That's right.
Logos is the one that looked like an eye to me.
That's right.
Yeah. So for tech and weapons, the cool thing about the Sanctum folk are that since Ember is a psychoactive substance, I feel like I'm using the wrong word for that. It's like psychoreactive. There we go. Psychoreactive substance. So no, Amber doesn't get you high. It just reacts to your psyche. That's, I guess, maybe an important distinction there. So as a psychoreactive substance, Ember, the Sanctum people put Ember into their armor and into their weapons and into their technology, and the wielder of that technology or weapon or whatever, their will, their belief gets funneled through the psychoreactive substance of the ember and powers up their weapons and armor and everything. So that's why they get like these cool hallowed blasters and giant glowing laser swords. It's because they're funneling their own psyche through the ember into these weapons to make them more powerful.
Yeah, not to like continue drawing the 40K aspect and I feel bad because we keep drawing like like lines to different fiction, but like it definitely does have that sort of uh Eldar, like
Yeah,
our weapons are just they only work because of psychic energy kind of thing. That's pretty cool.
yeah. Sanctum really, they're big fans of archons. They've got the foam fingers. They like archon number one, um, because the archons are kind of what they aspire to eventually be as beings of like perfection and pure energy. That's kind of what Sanctum is going for. I should also say, living in Sanctum is if you're not one of the knights or anything, um, you're kind of a lesser class, but it's still pretty great. Like, everything's peaceful, it's very idyllic. You've got food, you're protected, not a whole lot going wrong. So it's kind of like paradise, so to speak. Uh, and then the knights obviously have like they kind of they make everyone else eschew personal belongings for the most part. Like ostentatious personal belongings. Obviously, you're allowed to have like your own shoes, but like no palaces or riches or anything like that. But then the churches themselves have a lot of that. But it doesn't. I didn't get the sense of it being corrupt. I got it more as a sense of kind of like, look, you guys don't need money. You're doing fine. We'll just take all the money and make super cool churches and have all sorts of awesome technology that we'll use to go like fight stuff.
Keep things idyllic.
Exactly. Um, so Sanctum's pretty. So then on to Shadows. Shadows are. It was a race of elves called the Svar, Svarr. They're organized loosely into different guilds, although they originated as a particular race of elves. Other races can join them after they arrived on the Crucible. Um, they mostly rely on subterfuge and trickery and theft, classic kind of like rogues from D&D or really any IP. If you think of like a classic thief, classic rogue, this is totally what Shadows is. And you can get that from their cards too. They steal Ember, they capture Ember. You can deal damage after you steal something, stuff like that. I mean, it's you know, pretty clear that they hit the nail right on the head as far as what they're going for.
Right.
The cool thing with Shadows is that their history, it speaks of a time where they lived in like not well lit, but like they lived in the light and they everything was happy and everyone was cool and everything was great. And then for some reason they were pushed into the shadows with a capital S, and they were forced from that point on to scavenge to survive and kind of fall into these subterfuge, trickery, theft habits to get by. Um, it's unclear if this happened before they came to the Crucible or if this event was their arrival in the Crucible. Like they were in a happy, great land and then they got sucked into the Crucible and that was the time of shadows that forced them into this life. Or if that happened and that's what drew them into the Crucible, who knows? So I thought that was a pretty cool little bit of lore. Most of their tech is stolen or scavenged or repurposed, but one of the things that makes them unique is their stealth cloaks, or their invisibility cloaks. If you actually look on the art of the different Shadows creatures and even some of the other Shadow stuff, you'll see that they have these little metal plates with 3 kind of black dots on them. Those are the stealth generators.
Oh, I mean, and that then ties into their house
Right.
icon as well.
Yes. Actually, yeah, that's right. Duh. And they also that's what gives them the elusive ability too.
Oh,
So they cover themselves in these stealth patches, so to speak, and that gives them like full body coverage for stealth. As far as what they look for in an Archon, they prefer Archons that will get them stuff. It's very lucrative for them to accompany Archons because it gives them access to more technology and all the stuff they look for. So it's really
pretty
just
much not picky.
right. It's really a materialistic benefit for them. Um,
Right.
so that brings us to the last house, Untamed. Untamed is literally everything else. It's all of the wild animals, plants, fungus, everything that is not one of the other houses is untamed. It's kind of the way of describing like the wilderness. Anything that's not part of a civilization is like part of this untamed. Um, Including people. If there's people that kind of didn't really find a place in civilization and they left civilization, then that's why you have, humanoid people in the Untamed, like the Witch of the Eye and Chota Hazari. Those are all people that just preferred to be out in the wilderness. They can consume ember, and as we kind of saw from the diss, if you consume ember, it gives you weird psychic powers. People interpret that as magic. So the Witch of the Eye isn't so much a witch that uses magic as she has psychic powers from eating all this ember. And they can also commune with creatures as a result of that. So, you can see them talking to plants. They're very druidic in that sense, which you also get from the art style if you look at them.
Yeah.
The cool thing about the Untamed lore is it mentions that there are mechanical fairies in the Crucible that are charged with maintaining the different biospheres and, to a degree, keeping balance between the different species of animals and everything. I think the main point is that they make sure nothing goes extinct, but they don't really stop anything from interacting with anything else. So they're not going to stop a bear from eating a wolf, but they might step in to try to make sure wolves don't go extinct as a result. Or maybe they don't. I don't know. It wasn't really clear. They just maintained a balance. But when you see like dew fairies and stuff, those are those mechanical beings that are used to keep balance in the biospheres, which is pretty cool.
Nice.
Yeah, it's kind of neat. So that's kind of it for the houses. Oh, so as far as why the Untamed would hook up with an Archon, it's really all over the place. They're all kind of wild animals for the most part, so they can have a variety of reasons for joining up with an Archon. A lot of times it can be because Archons provide them with a regular supply of like food, an easygoing lifestyle that's a lot less dangerous than having to live out in the woods and defend yourself all the time. So a whole bunch of different reasons they can join up with the Archon. Also consuming Ember, and Archons tend to find Ember. So, there's that too. Yeah, Archons are not the only things that want Ember. So
Yeah.
uh,
Clearly.
yeah. So I mean that's kind of it for
Yeah.
what we know for the lore. As far as where you can find the lore, there's obviously the rule book itself. If you don't have a physical copy of the rule book, you can get it right from Fantasy Flight Games. If you go to their site, you go to the Keyforge site, they have different materials that you can download. And in the rule book is all of this lore, most of this lore that I've talked about. Also on their site, there's a series of stories that have Inca the spider as the narrator. Those actually came out before the game. They were kind of like preview for the game lore. And you might be able to find some other pieces of lore, trickled out here and there. And obviously the cards themselves are a good place to find lore, either in the images or in the flavor text.
Yeah, I think I had read through the Inca one, and that was super cool.
I like it. Yeah, that's pretty cool. So I'm interested to see what kind of new lore might come out as a result of the expansion.
Yeah, it definitely is put now having a better idea of the lore. It kind of does make me excited to see how they continue along with it.
Yeah.
And like I hope that this adds like a bit of a flavor to your play experience when you're playing cards. Like we or playing the game. Like we were, because we went from the one episode of the kind of back to basics idea, and this kind of fell into that too. It was just like, well, so we talked about like how to play the game a little bit. Like let's talk about like the periphery around the game. And I think the next episode we're gonna like talk about, how to play the game competitively and what you kind of need to be aware of.
Yeah.
So we'll have that for you next week. So having said that, we do have some, as we had mentioned at the top of the show, we do have a giveaway to do. The Strategic Dino was very, very kind to give us some tokens of his to give away with the show. So we have some stun and armor tokens that he had made up, and we do have another thing to give away next week. But for now, we're going to give away these stun and armor tokens. We'll put up a picture or send up a link to to his store for that. When this episode comes out, you can either share the post on Facebook or retweet it using hashtag KeychainsDino. And then we'll choose a random share or retweeter to receive the prize. We're going to keep this limited to the US only. And I believe we're going to cut off for the following Friday.
Yep. So this episode will be out on Friday. And let's call it midnight the following Friday. That will cut it off. So this episode will come out on February 22nd. So you have until March 1st, midnight. Well, I guess that would be Eastern Standard Time in the US to retweet. So March 1st would be the deadline.
Yeah, and again, thank you very, very much to Steve at Strategic Dino. He was super cool to give us these to send out to you guys.
Yeah. This stuff's good. I'm actually. I think you. Were you gonna put in an order for some stuff too?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, I know I'm gonna pick up. Like I saw these stun and armor tokens, and I'm like, you know what? I almost don't want to give them away, but that would be a real jerk move. So I'm just gonna buy my own.
Yeah, I'm thinking about grabbing that starter set that he's put together, or not the starter set, but just like the complete
little
set,
package.
Yeah,
definitely.
Because I just really like those laser cut keys. The only problem is though, as I want the unique amber too. I want that.
So just set aside a few $100s and just get everything he's ever made.
Yeah, that sounds great. I'm sure he'd love
he'd be fine with that.
So you can also find all of his stuff at strategicdino.com. That goes right to his Etsy shop, and you can look at all of his awesome things. If you don't win it, you can certainly give him some of your hard-earned money, so you can have the sweet tokens that he put his hard-earned effort into.
Yeah, I'm sure if you can also give him your easily earned money, I don't think he'll care how difficult the money was to come by.
No, I think that
if you find a 20 on the street, I'm sure he'll be fine. Like, just send that in.
Yeah. Don't send money over through the mail.
No, yeah, probably not the physical money, but
So in closing, you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter at KeychainsPod, or you can send us an email at keychainspod@gmail.com, and we'll talk to you guys next Friday.
Take care.
Bye.